Are we recording? Right. Let's call this meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. Let's please start with the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Sunshine Law notice. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. This meeting is being held through the Zoom meeting platform being broadcast from Borough Hall, 748 River Road, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this special council meeting of April 27, 2022 is available by call-in phone number or through web conference Zoom. Members of the public will be on mute until it's time for questions and/or comments, which will be announced. At that time, the public has the opportunity to question and/or comment by phone or through Zoom by the raise hand button and will be called on at the appropriate time. Notice of this meeting is based on the adoption of resolution number 2022-105, adopted by the mayor and council at their April 11, 2022 regular meeting. Notice of this special meeting was sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, and the Star Ledger on April 14, 2022. Notice was also posted on the Borough website, Facebook page, Constant Contact, the bulletin board in the municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of this meeting. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Christner Keith.
Here.
Cole. Koch.
Here.
McHugh.
Here.
Neff.
Here.
Rodriguez.
I am here.
Teresa, the chief, engineer Gardella, Eli Goldstein, Rick Adelson, and Brian Mead are also in attendance.
Thank you. In a second, I'm going to turn over to Eli Goldstein along with Rick Adelson for a presentation on the borough facilities. Just to give you a little insight on how we would prefer this to work, Eli, if you could present on the police department first, and then we'll move along to council questions on the police department only, followed by public comment on the police department only. And then after that, we'll move along to a presentation on the DPW facility, followed by council questions on the DPW facility, and followed by public comment on the DPW facility. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Eli Goldstein from the Goldstein Partnership, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me pull up our presentation. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
All right, so the slides are not exactly in the order you requested, but I will present them in that order. So we'll start with this, which is the site plan for the police site. Quickly give you an overview and turn it over to Rick to fill in some of the details. This is the footprint of the existing police building. Community center is here, dotted line. This is the proposed new police building and the police, what we call the police storage building. And I'll ask Rick to now describe some of the features of the site plan. Rick?
I'm gonna find the mute button. You'd think we know where that is by this point. So we are looking at the building. We have parking on the east and south side of the building with a total of 27 parking spaces. We have, as Eli pointed out, the storage building at the rear. Including in that building, obviously, are some bathrooms that I assume Eli will talk about in a little while. On the west side of the site, we have a sidewalk that connects from Fisk Street to the park. Building is located between the sidewalk and the parking lot. To the front of the building, we have an accessible walkway, with a ramp, as well as stairs into the building. We have a sally port for transference of prisoners, detainees on the east side. And let's see what else. Existing communication tower is the triangle on the far right side. That is where it is existing and is to remain. That is the highlights of this. For other things of note, handicap parking obviously is indicated. I believe that's the highlights of the site plan. It's a relatively straightforward, very similar to what we have presented previously.
Can you talk a little bit about any site improvements in front or around the site?
Sure. As part of the plan, we are planning to widen the road and straighten the road. You'll see on the right side of the site, Eli, if you could, in the shaded area, you can see the curved line. That is the old curb line. So we're widening the road a couple of feet, also extending that down to the corner, as shown in the insert below. So we are widening that. We're also putting a new sidewalk along the front of the police property, and that also extends to the corner.
Thank you, Rick. All right, so let's move on. So these are the floor plans of the proposed police building. 3 levels: basement, partial basement, first floor and second floor. The basement contains a large storage room for archives, plus certain support facilities for the police department, the armory, the evidence storage, and another storage room. The first floor, the entrance, faces Fisk Street on the north end of the building. And then visitors come into a small lobby. There's a records division here, control room. And as Rick mentioned, there's a garage here for detainees to be brought into the building, with some jail cells buried in the middle of the building. And then there are various departments, detective bureau offices here, office here, the chief's office here. And there's an interview room on the east side. On the second floor, we have, there are 2 sets of stairs up to the second floor, plus an elevator. We have a training room for the police department, conference room, server room, and we have the locker and toilet and shower rooms for all the officers. And then there's an outdoor, a flat roof, relatively flat roof in the back here, which will contain most of the mechanical equipment, the HVAC equipment for the building. And that's pretty much the organization of the police department. On to the next slide. These are elevations of the police building. This is the side that faces Fisk Street, the north. This is the west side facing the walkway between Fisk and the park. This is the east side with the garage door for the sally port. And this is the south side where there'll be an entrance for the staff to come into from the parking lot. And materials are meant to be residential in scale. We have residential shingle roofing, residential siding, residential scale windows. And that's pretty much the picture for the police building. So Mayor, turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you. I'm gonna go in the same direction I guess I would if we were in the basement at Borough Hall. Assuming Councilwoman Christner Keefe is ready to go. If you have any questions for Eli.
Can I actually go last, Mayor, if you don't mind?
Okay, I guess I can move from the other side of the dais. And Councilwoman Cole, are
Thank
you prepared with questions?
I am prepared and happy to kick us off.
Great,
Thank you, Mayor.
sure.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate you being here tonight. No particular order. I'd like to just dive in a little bit. Do you know the current, or do you know the square footage of the community center room that's currently in the PD? Just the one main room.
Something tells me, I don't know, remember exactly, but I think it's something like 1,000, 1,200 or something. It
Okay.
almost sticks in my head, but I could confirm that.
It's all right. An estimate is fine. It must be about right. I've spent enough time in there. So if we could look at the site plan. I mean, one of the things, what we can't see on the site plan are all the adjacencies. There's a reference to residential on both sides. But what we can't see is that to the south, we have basketball courts, a playground, tennis courts, and the fields area, which just generally speaking is a connection that community really enjoys between the PD and the kids' activities, family things. So it's very important that we maintain that connection. I know that we have a sidewalk here on the western side of the site that leads to the fields, past the basketball court into the fields. And I also think I'm seeing a fence. So could you please tell me, it appears as though there's a fence between that sidewalk and the building as proposed.
If I may, there's a post and rail fence just to separate the two uses, so to speak. So
Separate which two uses? Sorry, Rick.
to separate the path to the park from the police function. So it's just a post and rail. It's a 3 or 3.5 foot high 2-rail fence, similar to the fence that currently exists between the basketball court and the parking lot in the police parking lot. Just so you don't go wandering into the police site unknowingly.
Well, I will say we enjoy the connection between our community police building and the kids in particular. So I'm not sure separating the uses has any real value for community life at Fairhaven, but you'll hear from other people. And is that all hardscape from the fence east?
It's all landscape from the fence. I mean, it's landscape from the fence to the building, grass, and let's see. I have more slides than Eli does.
You want me to stop sharing? You'll share a landscape plan?
I certainly can. Let's see. I need to find a share screen. I need to share that screen. Share. Did that share?
Looks like it's starting to. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel so much better. Landscape plan was top of my list. Why don't we have a landscape plan? So are the on this western edge on the west side of the sidewalk, are those existing trees? Because I know we do have a nice.
Unfortunately, the geometry of those trees and the grades don't work, so we are removing and replacing.
And how many trees are you removing in this proposed landscape plan? Or better yet, I'll ask it this way. How many existing trees are remaining?
The only tree that is definitively remaining is the existing. Question at the moment.
Can I figure this out? Let's see. So I believe we're actually removing the majority, if not all, of the trees on site as part of this project. I mean, unfortunately, the alignment of the driveways and things like that don't allow preservation of the trees between the grade changes and the alignment. So the trees are proposed to be removed.
So that stand of trees that exists now, it's there, you're saying their removal is necessary because of the
Grade change
sidewalk?
between the sidewalk and the grade changes. Yes.
I mean, but if it were not for that pathway, which of course we need a connection, so I'm not saying we shouldn't have one, but if it were not for that sidewalk, would we be able to keep those existing trees?
Yes, I mean, there is drainage piping that's going through there that should be clear of the trees, but the sidewalk is the driving force.
It's the major one, okay.
Yeah.
And then,
Also know that there's an encroachment on that side between with the neighbor's property encroaching onto the police property. So that gets cleaned up as part of this as well.
okay, well, that's probably best. I'm not sure. We'll come back to this. So when I spent some time looking at, there's some terrific little seems like opportunities. If we could look now at the, well, one thing before we leave the site plan. So there's 7 parking spaces on this south end, and there is no through traffic there. I just want to dog ear that, so when we come back to it, we understand why that's important. Could you please look at the storage building floor plan with me?
I guess the question would be, Mayor, do you want to talk about the storage building as part of the police building complex or deal with it separately?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the police storage building, yes, let's talk about that along with the police department.
Okay, so then I should go,
I'm going
Show
to
everybody
stop.
the
I'm
plan.
going to stop sharing.
I should show everybody the plan so that we know, everyone knows what we're looking at. Hold on. Okay, this is the plan of the police storage building. North is up. So this is a storage garage with the garage door facing north, which contains some cages for police to store equipment. The south end of it is a covered outdoor patio facing the ball fields. And in between is an enclosed building which contains men's and women's bathrooms to serve primarily to serve the ball fields. And then the elevations of this very simple building. This is the north view. Here's the garage door into the garages. This is the south view, and this is an overhang that projects way out in front of the wall. And these are the side views of the building. All right.
So, okay. So Eli, looking at your elevations, because we could start there, I'm seeing the north elevation is a garage door, and that's not a man door there, that's a wall, right?
Correct.
We have a solid wall there, which is visible from the street. There probably is going to be a natural flow. Well, we'll get back to that. But so there's this terrific area under the opening, right? Where you have, it's a very simple structure, as you rightly say, somewhat antiseptic, right? Like it's a great starting place for some of the things that we might want to add to make it really more personal for Fairhaven. And I started to look at what that might involve. For example, the space underneath the covered patio area, if you want to look at it, is about 700, a little over 700 square feet. If we were to consider adding collapsible doors or barn doors or something that would make it a little bit more usable during different seasons. And I'm very much want us to be thinking about flexible use of space that can be converted and used throughout the year so that our tax dollars are getting we're leveraging our tax dollars the best we can. So that's where I'm coming from, but it's about 720 square feet right now. I notice right now there's no electric or, well, I don't think there is, but, or lighting.
No, there's lighting. There's lighting.
What do
There's
you
a
have in
light-
there?
There's a lighting from the roof structure, lighting the whole patio, and there's Wi-Fi hotspot. And
Terrific.
the bathrooms are set up so that they can be used all year,
Is there HVAC in here somewhere?
only to the extent of serving the bathrooms.
Okay. So easy enough if we wanted to. So where I'm going is, you know, the adjacencies are what come to mind. You have this lovely little building here, and on this side it faces the basketball courts. I said we're going to lose one tennis court. We're going to keep one. Is that right?
Rick, what, can you answer that?
This plan proposes no changes to the courts.
Doesn't the patio area encroach on one of the courts?
No.
The handball court or the?
There's the wall that's falling down is encroached on that, but it does not encroach on the tennis courts. Tennis courts are beyond.
Okay, so it has this nice relationship to these recreational amenities. That's where I'm coming from. And we have about 720 square feet covered with a little additional enclosures. We'd have the option of having that potentially usable for, you know, like the after game snack party or birthday parties. Adding an 8-foot trellis around all three sides could give us upwards of 1,300 square feet, some seating area. I guess I want us to think about ways that this can be converted and made more flexible. We're losing 1,000 square feet in our PD that was otherwise used for community gatherings, and this is situated and about the right size for some of those activities and programs. So I wanted to capture that thought so that we could maybe come back to it at the appropriate time. So I'm just adding it. Is there a water filling station as part of this?
Yes, it's right here.
And the location of that is determined by?
Well, we wanted it to be undercover and also as economical as possible. So it's tied into the plumbing that's right behind it in all the bathrooms.
Yeah.
So that, because this is all going to be winterized, we want to make sure that that all of these facilities, including the bottle fill, could be used. anytime.
So one of the things that we like is that, like, when the kids get to interact with the police officers, the officers like to interact with the kids too. And I'm imagining, you know, like a ping pong table under there. And if they want to go get the paddles and the balls, they have to go sign them out at the PD. But those bathrooms are really big. Maybe there's a way also to make use of some storage space that's accessible from the patio. Throwing a lot of ideas out here, guys, but I haven't been able to participate in this in any really substantive way. So hopefully we can talk about it. This is definitely a community level scale of design considerations that you wouldn't necessarily have except for this kind of community input. So I appreciate you hearing me out. Do we have a hose bib planned anywhere?
I believe so. I don't recall where on the building it is, but I'm pretty sure there's at least one.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And is there a landscape plan for this area?
It's part of the plan that Rick showed. You want to?
Okay.
There's no particular landscaping in this back area at this point. It's grass that ties into the rest of the park.
Okay, we could come back to that. And the only other thought was the roof over the pavilion. It could be a simple skylights in that area might bring some natural light into that the area that is covered. I've done that before on some my other stuff. And it's a nice addition. Sometimes they have to be cleaned, but it's usually worth it.
Keep in mind, it's completely open up into the gable.
Great.
So this is the size of the opening.
Oh, I see
facing
what you're saying.
South, and it's also open on the two sides. So there's not gonna be any shortage of daylight in there.
Well, the gable could be enclosed such that barn doors or collapsing doors could be incorporated. Should the community decide that that space could be better put to use or made more optimal in some way for, you know, additional seasons, that seems like it could still be viable. The reason I mentioned the wall on the elevation, on this north elevation, is because I was imagining walking through the site. And I know we want to avoid taking pedestrians through a parking lot. But one of the natural access points is probably going to be right down the middle of the site where you would cross. You would cross between this building. If the PD is on your right instead of the left, and you were walking past the storage building, would take you directly to the fields and the tennis courts and stuff. So I want to put that out there as an idea because there's a certain, it's a very fluid pathway. Pedestrians would only be crossing that section of the parking lot where there is no through traffic. And it would give us an opportunity to preserve the trees on the west side of the lot. And those are mature trees. I'll just say you can't get them back. It takes time. So food for thought. But the wall is a rather uninviting. I know it's a garage door, but if there was some glass there, or I don't know, it has an uninviting feeling. It's a little bit, if we remember, it's a community policing department, that the recreation facilities are right behind it, that we do want people to come and go through here. We really don't want a separation between our youth and our PD. I think that the synergies there have immeasurable and calculable benefits. And even the kids call that area back there the youth center. And I said, well, what's at the youth center? And there's not much, but they don't need much. And they're happy to hang out back there, and it's a safe place for them. So I'll just wrap up my comments on the PD. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me kick us off. I had just one more thing on the elevations, if I could. We're showing 2 chimneys. I mean, I imagine we have things we need to vent. But what are these 2 chimneys doing?
Yeah, those are vents. A lot of the air handling equipment is in the attic. And somehow we had to get fresh air in there. And we decided, again, in the interest of giving this a residential scale, since we had to put some sort of vertical vents out of the attic anyway, that we would put them inside rectangular enclosures and express them as if they're chimneys. Chimneys are essentially vents of a sort too. So we needed 2. This is how we.
What is the required height of the vents that are inside those? Do they have to stick up 18 inches, 24, 36?
Well, no, because they're not heating, they're not appliances per se. I don't know that there's a minimum height, but there's a minimum distance between them, which had to do with the one as an intake and one as an exhaust.
So these are, it's personal, I suppose, but it's a residential detail that feels a little bit odd on this more institutional building. I know I can see the effort to make it fit into the residential area, which it does nicely but it also signifies an institutional feel. The chimneys struck me as slightly off.
Well, keep in mind, there have to be some sort of vertical vents coming out of the roof in these locations. And we felt rather than having exposed round or rectangular ducts, that we would wrap them with something that looked a little more presentable. So
I do, I appreciate that. That's why I was asking you how high up they were required to be, how tall.
as I said, I don't know that there's a minimum height. There's probably 3 foot or 4 foot minimum, but they have to be this distance apart. So
What we're showing, it looks like you're showing corner board at every 90-degree angle.
yes,
Yeah. And is the corner board versus a mitered corner, does it have some benefit?
well, the particular siding we're using isn't suitable for turning the corners itself. So the corner board provides a neat and weather resistant way of turning the corner. Since we can't do beveled or mitered.
Oh, it's
siding.
mitered metal? The siding is metal?
No, I said we can't miter the siding at the corners because it's not made for that purpose. So
What
we're
is the
putting,
material?
it's fiber cement siding.
Like a hardy board?
Yes, that's correct. That's one of the trade names. Yeah.
Okay. Have there been any color considerations in the discussions?
We haven't discussed colors because it's a public bid. We won't know exactly which manufacturers are part of the successful bidders package until they're awarded the contract. And each manufacturer has a slightly different color palette. So once they're on board, we will put together a proposed color board to review with the facilities committee and then pick the colors. But it'll be one of a standard color of whatever manufacturer is submitted.
I'll just make a plea that the corner board and the hardy board and the corner board and that it's all the same color. That nobody decides to put a vertical contrasting color. That's my request. And I see I have one more question. I'm sorry, Eli, but on the second floor of the police building, there's 2 rooms towards in the front. I think one says training and one says conference. Is that wall in the middle collapsible to create one large room?
No, because folding partitions of that sort are not especially good in terms of acoustic separation. So you could never have successfully activities on the opposite sides
And both
at the
of
same
them.
time.
I attended a police training, actually to meet our wonderful force after I was elected. And everyone was in one room, and I don't know that that happens a lot, but we needed almost all the space in the community center room. So that's why I was asking, and I'm sure the chief has helped advise you. I assume this entire program has had guidance from the chief. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. That completes my questions and comments.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cole. Before I go to Councilman McHugh, I believe Councilman Rodriguez wanted to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to touch on a few things that Tracy brought up, and maybe we can talk about, maybe answer some of the questions she's had. One thing we're trying to do is keep the police department open until the new building is completed. Can you talk about the impact on the sidewalk and the trees and the landscaping and the fortification of the foundation of the current PD while you excavate and build the new police department?
Yeah, actually, Rick, you could probably talk best about that.
I can. So in order to build this, we are using the working area. We're basically splitting the site at the curb line of the existing parking lot to maintain the existing police station open
Grades and geometry were set so that we didn't undermine the foundations, because the basement on the new police building is deeper than the basement on the existing police building. So we set geometry such that we weren't undermining the foundations of the police building during construction to allow that to proceed. Part of the reason the trees are in the way also there is because we need that for staging for construction of the building itself. We need to be able to work in that area with equipment during construction, because that path and that clear space on the side of the building will be our construction working area. So we need, unfortunately, we're on a very tight site, and keeping the police building open is a controlling factor in the design.
Thanks.
Also,
And go ahead,
just-
Eli, sorry.
Real quick, Councilwoman Cole had mentioned about residential. The residential is here. This is the church. And I believe, Chief, that there's been discussions with the church about using its parking lot for police vehicles during construction. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we talked to them, nothing official, but he said that would not be a problem.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. Yeah. And I just wanted to mention that, as the chair of the facilities committee, Tracy, we did take a lot of these notions under consideration, and because of the engineering and because of the logistics about putting up a new building while maintaining the current structure, we had to sacrifice some areas. Unfortunately, luckily, none of the trees are, historical trees, if you will. And we try to take as much care to put back more than we took down, understanding that it does take a long time for trees to grow. So there was a lot of discussion and conversation, but we couldn't find any other way.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. And again, thank you, Councilwoman Cole. Councilman McHugh, if you're ready to roll, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Good call out on that existing structure that we have. And obviously there's considerable cost savings to keeping the building running while we do the work on this. I'm gonna go somewhat out of order because I think I may have heard Councilwoman Cole call out water spigot in the storage station. Was that called out? Did I hear that
Yeah.
properly?
Yes,
So there will be at least one or maybe two water spigots in this storage building, correct?
I'm pretty sure. I just don't recall where on the building they are.
Okay, so that will happen, maybe underneath the water filling station, something along those lines, but that has been called out and addressed. I just wanted to clarify that. Not too many other questions. I just want to kind of point out that I appreciate that, 2 years ago or so when we started this, we thought we were somewhat looking forward with the EV charging stations for the future. And if you notice those kind of all the way on the south end of the parking, there's 2 EV towers, which could potentially fulfill 4 charging stations, correct? One tower could charge 2 vehicles is what I'm getting at, right?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, it seems like kind of by the time we get to this EV, be a lot more common as it's already kind of picking up. The other thing, Eli, did I hear you say that we are going with the AC
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
bathrooms?
I'm sorry, we're going with I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Will the bathrooms be, I know they'll be heated, but will they be air conditioned as well?
Just heat, just heat.
Just heat, right? There was a considerable cost to providing air conditioning to that.
That's
Do you have
correct.
that number? Do you have that number offhand?
I don't.
Remember an estimate by any chance?
We had sent through that estimate, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, but I don't have it at my fingertips.
Yeah, I just want to call that out too, in case that question arose. I don't have any other questions. I just want to point out and thanks for all the work and all the input. I think one other input that came through our rec liaison was he kind of called out the Wi-Fi hotspot in the kind of open paved area. Will there be any additional hardwired, maybe like a pull down, like a screen or anything like that, or at least hardwired AV connections or anything like that for rec to kind of link into?
At the storage building?
Yes, in that open area.
No, we haven't made any other provisions there.
Okay, so there are those two nice wide open areas. The doors are on the perimeters, right? They won't be near the water filling station. So there potentially could be those two nice, I'm not sure of the run between the charging or the water filling station and the doors, but
It's about 15 feet either way.
about 15 feet. So a pretty nice wide open area to do something potentially for rec down the line. That's it on my end. Not too many questions. I just want to call out a couple things in case people were wondering going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman McHugh. Moving along, Councilwoman Koch, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple of questions I'd like to pose, but not in any particular order of importance. Could you tell me or give me a comparison of the square footage between the old police station and the proposed police station?
I don't have that number here. I know that we issued something again several months ago with those areas, but I don't have it in front of me, but I can get it for you.
Yeah, that would be important to me. Thank you. I also noticed on your site plan, your I forget what you call it, the interior plan, you have 2 staircases.
Yes,
Are they necessary? Do you need to have 2 staircases and an elevator?
we're required to have an elevator to be accessible under the ADA.
Right,
Correct.
no, I understand that, but my question is,
And the stair-
are there,
the
you
stairs-
need to have 2 staircases in addition to the elevator?
Yes, because of to have 2 means of egress from the 2nd floor. We have only 1 coming up from the basement because it's a lower occupancy, but we need 2 from the 2nd floor.
Okay, thank you. And can you describe to me some of the materials that are going to be used on the exterior of the building?
Sure. So clapboard siding, aluminum clad wood windows, asphalt shingle roofing, stone base at the bottom of the wall, exposed aluminum gutters and leaders. That's pretty much it. And that's the same palette of materials we're planning to use also on the storage building and the public works building.
Okay, are there any specific architectural details that you'd like to draw our attention to that you've included?
I think the elevation should give everyone a pretty clear picture of what the building's going to look like.
Okay,
I don't know that there's anything else I can add to that.
okay. And going back to the site plan, is there a passageway along the west side of the storage building to the parking lot? I know on the far western side of the property, I'm on the planning board, and when you made your presentation, we specifically requested that there be a passageway for the kids to get from Fisk Street to the back fields. And looking at your storage facility in the lower right-hand corner of the site plan, are there any accommodations for people who might be walking to their cars that are along the western side of the property?
There is a sidewalk along the western side of the storage building that comes out at the crosshatched area next to
Okay.
parking space number 22, I'm sorry, 21. And then there are also sidewalks along the western side of the parking lot from the handicap parking and
Right.
along the back of the building that ties to the main path.
Right.
So
Uh,
there's
And how do
connectivity.
you get from the, I guess it's the northwest corner of the police storage garage. Once you get to that corner from the walkway, how would you get to the parking facilities that are on the east side of the property?
You would walk
Would you
across
just
the
cross the
parking lot.
parking lot?
You'd
Okay,
have to
so
cross
there-
the parking lot. Now, honestly, there's not good connectivity to the park from the parking lot and from that area. There's a path behind the tennis courts, but that's not going to be a primary entrance the way the park is currently laid out without changes to the park, which are not part of this project. Eli, I can show you on Google, so just to give you a better idea of how the geometry all works, if that helps.
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Eli, can I share?
Yeah.
And if I can find the button to do so. That share.
Yes.
So the storage building falls in the existing asphalt pavement behind the existing community center.
Mhm.
There's grass to the park, but the main path for the main path for the park is really on the right side. And actually, there's really not good connectivity to the park. People go through the field, and the asphalt paths kind of die at the tennis courts. So it's really not currently designed for connectivity between the police station and the park. It's used all the time. I've seen hundreds of kids walk through it.
Right.
But it's not along defined paths currently. So by adding that path along the west side, we're creating a direct connection from Fisk to the park without going through the police station parking lot, which was one of the objectives of the planning board and the committee that we were given.
Right, but that's not my question. My question is, if you were walking along by the storage shed, you said on the western edge of the storage shed, there's a pathway, right, that takes you to the northwest corner of the storage area. Is that correct?
So there's a path, and I'm drawing in yellow, which doesn't help.
No, I see it. I can see it.
Let's see if we make it red. So if you wanted to go to the parking spaces over here, you would walk across the parking lot. There is no walkway. We have grade change that we have to accommodate for the antenna. So I really can't I can't raise the grade along the eastern side of the lot.
Mhm.
And I couldn't, really not practical to get past the antenna without constructing retaining walls and things like that. And honestly, I'm not sure there's enough room between the antenna and the parking lot to even squeeze a walkway there or path there if you wanted to.
Okay, so that was my question, whether or not you could bring a pathway across the northern end of the storage area to a pathway that runs alongside the eastern edge of the property where the parking spaces are. You're saying that's not possible?
It would be very difficult. You'd probably wind up needing to replace the antenna, build a retaining wall, and then you can do it, but it would be less than desirable.
Okay. I have one final question. I'm not sure, Mayor, you would have to let me know if this is an appropriate time to discuss it. But when I look at the final numbers on the final page of our packet, I am shocked at the expense that we are incurring for these two facilities. And while now we're talking about the police department facility, Eli, if you had to, and you had to scale the project back because of financial considerations for our residents, is there anything in particular that you would choose right now to remove from the project?
Well, really, it's a programmatic thing. That's a question that the committee would have to decide if there's anything that could be eliminated or reduced. There's nothing fancy about the materials. The materials are very economical construction materials. The building, a police building, tends to be more expensive than many other types of buildings because of the nature of the type of construction that needs to withstand earthquakes and
I understand that you have codes and standards that you have to build the building to, but in terms of maybe using materials, I noticed that you have stone at the lower half or the lower quarter of the building. You're using hardy board as a means of siding. Rooms in the building, you've got several conference rooms. I'm just wondering, is there any place where you would have the opportunity to scale back? Being the architect and the person who actually designed the project, would you be able to make any suggestions to the committee and to the council as to where we might scale back?
I suppose the only one that comes to mind, and potentially, but again, the committee would have to weigh in on this, is that if we could reduce the amount of the basement in the police building, we have a large open archives room there. It used to be even bigger, and we cut it back by reducing the amount of excavation. That might have some beneficial impact on the costs. But if you're talking about big impact on the cost, I don't think there's, short of starting over and making a much smaller building or buildings, I don't think there's anything that's going to do it. The costs, and we'll get to this later when we get to the cost page, but the costs are not just the buildings, but the development of the sites and the remediation of the existing buildings and the demolition of the existing buildings and the furniture. It's a big package of things that all go together. So while we're not going to reduce one part, there's still a lot of other parts that wouldn't be impacted. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mayor, before you go on, I'm just going to answer
Sure.
a question that Councilman McHugh brought up before, because I have access to the emails. The differential for adding air conditioning to the bathrooms in the police storage building was $20,000 from the mechanical engineer.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Councilwoman Koch. Councilman Rodriguez, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So Eli, thank you. Thanks to the whole team. I've been ingrained in this process for the better part of 5 years. This particular plan for about 1.5 years. There was a lot of thought by the committee and our professionals that went into how the parking lot was laid out and how do we save the existing building while we build the new building. And then we added on the storage facility, which has the benefit of the restrooms and the covered area. So I think Councilwoman Cole made a number of good points calling out some of the design elements and some of the reasoning, or at least asking questions about the reasoning and the landscape and the orientation. Because I've been involved in it, I don't have a heck of a lot of questions. I just wanted to ask the Eli and his team, relative to the process that we went through just for this particular design. I know we did designs on River Road in 2 different locations. How does this stack up from an economy standpoint or a financial standpoint relative to other projects you've done. I understand, and this really dovetails with what Councilwoman Koch was saying about the price. The sticker shock is big because we're used to doing smaller renovations on our homes or building homes in a residential capacity and not building institutional buildings that are supposed to last for 40 or 50 years. Can you just compare this programming and compare this project to others that you've done?
Sure. So first of all, I guess, and I'll get into this in more detail later, until about, I don't know, 15 months ago, material costs and cost of construction in New Jersey had inflated by very little on an annual basis for many, many years. But as we all know, it's a different world right now. And so we're seeing inflation, construction cost inflation of more than 1% a month. And you'll see later on in the presentation, over the last 12 months, the cost of construction in place has increased by something like 16%, which is just enormous. It hadn't increased 16% in the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years combined. And so the cost of this project, because of inflation, has gone up on the order of $2 million just since the beginning of last year, which is, this is a global issue. It has nothing to do with this project. In terms of cost per square foot, this is the cost per square foot of these buildings is just where we would expect it to be. It was where we expect it to be a year and a half ago, and then it's like everything else, it's increased by close to 20% since then. So this is what it costs to build public buildings today. It's expensive, but that's what it costs.
If I may, what is the cost per square foot for the PD as it's designed?
It's probably around $500, something like that. And that's consistent with what we have. Several police and municipal buildings under construction, not just in Monmouth County, but also in further south. And that's the going rate for such buildings.
I thought it was going to be higher.
Would this be a good time for me to jump in, since I have some similar concern as Councilwoman Koch?
Councilman Rodriguez, are you complete?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Neff, the floor is yours.
I don't have a lot of questions, but I did want to ask, I also did not have the benefit of being in the facilities committee, so I'm coming, without the full knowledge, and I'm sure all the elements were very carefully considered. But I am also concerned about the cost of the construction of both buildings. I'm wondering how critical that police storage garage area is in that second structure. I don't remember knowing that it was going to be there. Maybe I knew it, but I forgot about it. But I'm wondering, Eli, to what degree that second building, which has the restrooms and the police storage garage, to what degree is that adding to the total cost? What's the percentage of the total cost? Sorry, it says police storage garage. And is there any feasibility at all, and maybe not, to put that into the main building? Redesign the main building, the first floor, so that it can go there instead, and either not build that area or allow us to use that space for the rec center that we're losing instead, so that we can essentially regain a rec center area that we very much need.
Well, as far as whether it could be combined with the other building, that was something that we did look at some point when it first came up. And because of the geometry of the site, it was very awkward to do that. But if it's okay with you, Mayor, I'll turn to the page with costs, because There are a lot of questions about cost, and I think a lot of the answers are on this page. Is that okay?
That is okay, yes.
So this, just for everybody's benefit, is from Engineering News Record, which is an international magazine on construction costs. And this highlighted area, this is from March 14th of this year, shows that the building cost index had gone up 15.6% in the last 12 months. So this is what is the basis for our inflation part of our spreadsheet. So if we go to the next page, this is the breakdown of the costs. So Councilwoman Neff, you asked about where the costs were. So this column is for the police site and buildings. This column is for the public works site and building. And this, by the way, the police site and building includes the storage building. And then this is the cost for Bicentennial Hall. And I believe we calculated that the cost of the storage building was somewhere around $400,000, something like that, 500,000. If we built it as an addition to the police building, you'd still have to pay for the cost of the building. So the cost wouldn't be substantially different for that much space. And as I said, because of the shape of the site, it really doesn't lend itself to addition to the police building. And especially because it was meant to serve, with bathrooms, meant to serve the ball fields. There was lengthy discussion at multiple facilities meetings about the size and contents of the storage building and why it was important to build it. And I'll leave it to the members of that committee who are present to answer any questions about that.
Mayor, if I can jump in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the if we had attached that building to the police department, it wouldn't optimize the parking, and it would actually go up against the basketball court, which you can see on the diagram. Yeah, where we're mousing over right there. The idea was that the OEM, which is moving off of the DPW site and closer to the police department, that is the reason we're able to potentially shrink some of the site and the building over at DPW, which we didn't really get into yet, but we're trying to work these two projects in concert to realize some economies of scale, despite what Eli mentioned, which is out of our control, which includes the price inflation of the materials and the construction itself. So the best alternative, and we looked at multiple alternatives to where we would put the police storage garage. And this was the best alternative we could come up with.
I mean, I definitely appreciate it. I like I said, I don't have the benefit of the discussions. But if we were to cut back on anything in terms of costs, and I guess understand that area, Eli, you explaining that building is costing, I think it's at about 400,000 of the total cost. But I do wonder if we could, that's what I understood, right? 400,000, I think you
I
said.
can confirm that. Yes, that's my recollection, but I can confirm that.
You know, I do wonder whether, I guess I would question how critical it is to have that location used. And whether between the police station, maybe shrinking some of those spaces inside of the main police building, or I think maybe rethinking some of the DPW space, whether we could, I'm not even saying not build it, but just preserve that as our rec center, because we have to think that beyond these two buildings, we are going to have to figure out where to put the rec center if we lose it. And that's an additional cost on top of these two very expensive buildings, given the inflationary constraints that we are facing. And obviously that's not under our control, but just food for thought. That would be my main feedback, I think, as to one way to, what I think we should rethink that if we could, if possible.
Councilwoman Neff, any other questions?
No, I think that
that was my main one. And I just want to clarify, make sure I'm not suggesting what you increase the size of the main building and go, against the parking lot spaces. I was just talking about shrinking the spaces, within that footprint that you have designed. Just want to clarify that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Neff. Councilwoman Christner Keefe.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks to the Facilities Committee and Eli and your whole team for this presentation and the work that you've done. One of my questions goes back to a discussion we had the last time, or at least one of the times this was presented and discussed. The grading of the site is, the last time, if memory serves me, there was a significant, I don't want to say significant, there was a grade change that was quite a bit different than the current grading. Has that been maintained or has it been adjusted downward? Where does that stand?
Well, before Rick, I'm going to ask Rick to get into the details, but I just want everyone to recognize that it's very easy to think that the grade of the existing police site is relatively flat, but in fact, it's not. And that I'll ask Rick to put some, to quantify that a little bit for everybody's benefit.
So the grades have been revised so that the parking along the back of the back of the police parking lot, was it? I'm sorry.
The south park.
The south side, yes, is essentially at the same grade as the basketball courts now. Very similar to what it was. We slope up. We've adjusted the grades of the we raised the floor elevation of the building at some point along the pathway. There's a little ramp inside the building to actually raise the floor a little higher. We worked out handicap access across the front. So we raised the site to make better use of the existing topography. So the grades mesh much better than they had. No, we managed to eliminate all the retaining walls. So if that answers the question.
Yeah, I was just trying to, I remember the part of the discussion last time was there was, the basement and the elevation for that. There was a little bit of a change, but yes, I'm familiar with the site and it is not level with the existing street. It's a slope up.
There's about 5 feet, believe it or not, between this street
Okay.
and the basketball court.
Okay. If you could go to the front elevation, I have a recollection at one time, at least one rendition you had presented showed lights on the front of the building that were reminiscent of the existing lights on the front. Is that just not depicted here, or has that been excluded as an option?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I will get an answer for you.
Okay. And in looking at this elevation, the two chimneys, I understand that they have a functional purpose. Do they need to be located in the locations that they are?
Yes, because that's right under them is where the attic is that contains all the air handling equipment for the building.
Is it possible for them to be relocated, I guess, more near the left, I guess, when you're looking straight at the building, the left or the right walls of the exterior walls or the side walls? Because I know, I understood what you were sharing earlier, that part of the idea here is to help it fit into the residential nature of the community. And the two chimneys where they're currently located feel a little bit out of place. I don't know if there's whereas I feel like if they're on, adjacent to those exterior sidewalls, they would look more residential. I don't know. I feel like they look like two little antennas sticking up or something like that.
I don't really, well, I mean, if we move them, unfortunately, it's all related to a huge network of ducts that run through the building to get air up and down to all the floors and try to centralize it so that it would be as efficient as possible. So I think that would be pretty hard to do.
Okay.
And more
I'm sorry.
more costly too.
Okay. My other question is, I don't know if anybody else, either on the governing body or in the public, has seen this, or maybe someone from the committee can speak to it. The design that I'm looking at from the front looks somewhat, and maybe I'm just not getting the full picture here based on these drawings, but it looks really reminiscent of the front and center of Knollwood School. Was that an intentional design, put in place? Or
Well,
am I
I'm not
just not
familiar-
understanding the design?
I'm not familiar with Knollwood School, but if it's all right with you, Mayor, I can try to pull up the planning board presentation where we did a three-dimensional rendering of this, which might help Councilwoman Krista Keefe understand it in 3D. Should I do that?
That's certainly okay with me if it's not too hard to bring it up.
Yeah, give me a moment. Bear with me a moment.
You have it, Eli?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Let me share it. All right, so this was the garage, at the request of the chief, we consolidated this into one large door. But other than that, this is pretty accurate and up to date in terms of and that's probably the lights you were talking about in the front.
Yeah,
But this is meant to suggest what, the color may be different because this, again, the siding color hasn't been selected, but this was meant to suggest pretty closely what the building's gonna look like in 3D. And with landscaping.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful.
Meg, I
Do you-
get what you're saying about the reference to Knollwood. There's
Yeah, that was my first reaction. Eli, do these windows open?
I believe some of them do. We wanted to limit the number that are open just because for energy conservation, there are reasons to limit the number, because windows that are open, even when they're closed, are not as tight as windows that are not openable. So we've
And are
got,
they-
I believe we have one operable window in each major space.
Okay, and it's like the crank and they roll out,
Yes.
the kind of,
I
Okay.
think it actually might be a awning type window. Tip up.
oh, I see. Okay. Okay. And the front door style, I guess it's hard to see on both of these depictions. Is it intended to be full glass?
Let me go back to the elevations. Give me a moment. Having trouble getting back to where I was. Bear with me a second.
No problem.
You see that all right?
Yes.
Yeah, so here's the front door. It's meant to be mostly glass. Correct.
Okay, and it is, there's a vestibule inside that?
Correct.
The veneer, a stone veneer on the bottom of the building.
Yes.
There's quite a bit of it. And the reason I point this out is because it's really expensive. Of course, it looks beautiful. I'm just wondering if there would be a way to either bring the siding down further or to impact that with some other type of material or something. I just, know from my own interest in veneer that it's extremely expensive right now, or
Yeah, well, we
probably at
can-
all times, but especially right now.
We could certainly look at using like a decorative textured concrete block instead of stone. That would be an easy thing to compare.
Okay, and would there be potentially other, I don't know, materials, or even just bringing the siding down as far as you could, and then, with the landscaping in place, it would cover the balance?
Oh, well, we can certainly look at that. Well, just so everyone understands. Because of the grade change, and you can see the grade change here. At
Mhm.
the rear of the site, there's only a couple of feet of it. You can see here how at the rear, it's quite modest amount, especially at the entrance here. It gets to be taller toward the front because the grade drops away significantly over the length of the building. Again,
Yeah.
we can still look at other materials.
I don't believe I have any additional questions right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Christner Keefe. At this time, I want to move towards public comment only on the police department buildings, the police building and the storage building that's on that same plot of land. Please identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Teresa, is there anyone with their hand up?
Yes, Mayor, Marty Egger. I'm going to allow her to talk. Marty,
Thank
you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, I just
Hi,
did.
Marty.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. All right, I'll try to make this as quick as possible and apologize because I'm looking at these plans for the first time. Is the basement completely underground? Is my first question.
Yes,
Okay, so there are no windows or anything for the basement.
correct.
Okay, so that's one question. Another one was, and I didn't see it, but it's tiny. What is the total height of the building with the 3 floors, with the grading?
My record, I didn't bring the measured elevations with me. I think it's about 36 feet to the peak, something like that, above grade.
All right, so, and I'm thinking,
Oh, here it
That's-
is. There we
okay.
go.
31 and a,
It's 31.8.
yeah.
and that's with the grading.
Well, it depends where you measure from.
Uh-huh,
The grade-
that's what I'm
the
asking.
grade of- Yeah, the grade of the first floor, if it's 0, it's 31.8 above the first floor. And the
Oh, okay.
grade at the side doors adds another, let's say 3 feet. So it's about 35, 36 feet total at the highest.
All right, and referencing other buildings around that, would it be a lot taller than the other buildings around it, or would it be very similar?
It's similar to the 2-story residences in the neighborhood.
Okay, all right, and the heights of the ceilings, the basement and the first floor and the second floor, are they all the same? Are they different?
The first and second floor is typically about 8 feet.
8 feet? Mhm.
And I think the basement might be just slightly less. And that's because the water table is quite high in this area. We didn't want to dig down into the water table. Rick, you can
Okay.
talk more about that.
Okay, thank you. And then I have just, this is a comment, because they can't speak for themselves. And we're on the eve of Arbor Day, which is April 29th. It is the 150th anniversary of Arbor Day and the 50th anniversary of the Arbor Day Foundation. And we also are very, very concerned about our status as a tree city. And we've also been very concerned about clear cutting some properties in town. And I would just mourn mature trees coming down because it would make the staging easier. So I have spoken for the trees. Thank you very much.
Marty, thank you for your time and your questions and your participation.
Thank you.
Teresa, does anyone else have their hand up?
Anyone else from the public on Zoom that would like to ask a question about the police facility? Yes, I have Stephanie Adams, Mayor. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
Quick question / suggestion. I believe that you all mentioned that the duct work for the restrooms was there was a high cost involved, and Teresa, you pointed out that there would be, that it'd be about 20,000 to put in air conditioning. I'm wondering if any consideration was given that this building is pretty much completely separate from the main building, if any consideration was given to putting mini splits in the restrooms instead of ductwork. They're pretty efficient and a lot more cost effective. You would need to put the compressor somewhere, but it just might be a way to save some money.
When we asked our engineers what they thought the cost was, I don't think they necessarily designed the system, but based on their own experience, they felt that the incremental cost of putting in heat to that would be about 20,000. And I'm sure that I know that they have used mini splits on numerous of our projects, so I'm sure that that was one of the options they considered.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Mayor, if I may, just briefly,
Sure.
okay, I'll keep it short. I agree. I use a mini split in my 12 by 40 space, 2 of them in that area. We could heat and cool both the bathrooms and the pavilion if it were closed in during certain times of the year. It's south facing, it will get a lot of light, but with the mini split, you can keep it cool. They're very effective. They're tight, compact. They're not as expensive, certainly nowhere near $20,000. So I think that is really worth examining before we, just given what I personally know, and I know that's much less than what others, but it's really worth exploring. So I just wanted to emphasize that before we dismiss it.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councilwoman Cole. Councilman Rodriguez, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry for the wind in the background. I'm
No
almost
worries.
done commuting. When we spoke about air conditioning those locations, we also considered that you may only spend 2, 3, 4, or 5 minutes in the bathroom, and then it may go unused for a few hours. The cost of cooling in hot weather in a storage facility, we thought that the money saving was more important than trying to cool during hot weather. So there were some of those more practical considerations kicked around as well. But we hear you. We can look into it. There's a cost increase, but not much relative to what we're talking about for the entire project.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. Teresa, are there any other hands up for
I
public
don't
comment?
see any other hands from the public at this juncture, Mayor.
Okay, with that, I'm going to close out the public comment section for the police department. Eli, if you could now move on to presenting plans for the DPW facility. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Here we have the site plan for Public Works. I'll give you an overview and then ask Rick to fill in some of the details. So this is 3rd Street on the north, and the side we have Maple and Allen. The existing Public Works building is down here in this neighborhood. Let's see it. I think just dotted right there. And then we're proposing to build a new building much further to the north and redo the yard, creating a public parking lot on the north, separate and apart from the yard in the south. The idea being separating the public from the operations of the yard, which is a difference from what currently exists. So I'll ask Rick to fill in some information, and then Rich Gardella, I believe, is on the call too, in case there are any questions about the functional aspects of the program. He can answer those. Rick?
Sure. So as Eli mentioned, let's see. Eli, can you pan down just a little bit on that? No, other direction. Sorry, to the north. Just to along 3rd. So along the front 3rd Street side of the site, we have a bioretention basin along the front of the property. Behind the bioretention basin, we have a 30-car parking lot with access from both Allen and Maple, two-way access on both sides. In that parking lot, we have 3 spaces marked for recycling, as well as 2 handicap spaces. We also have an EV charger for 2 spaces. Below that, we have the Public Works building itself, which I'm sure Eli will talk about in more detail. To the west of the Public Works building, we have the outdoor recycling set. We have the area for outdoor recycling with 3 containers as dictated by the program. Moving further south, we have a fuel island to fuel the DPW equipment, as well as police cars and fire engines. We have all the way to the far south, we have a salt storage building, and we have some storage space for plows, other materials, parking for all the various pieces of DPW equipment. We have an 8-foot privacy fence surrounding the site. We have driveways off of Allen that are in essentially the same locations as the original driveways or the current driveways. Not shown on this, but you'll see a whole series of dots in the parking lot there just behind the building. We do have an underground detention system there for stormwater management, as well as the bioretention basin. We also have a series of water quality filters in the parking lot, because we didn't want to take the water directly from the from the DPW yard and take it out without pre-filtration. I think that's the highlights of this.
And there's off-site improvements.
Off-site improvements. We are showing curb and sidewalk along Maple, as well as some limited improvements, actually a realignment. Eli, you want to go all the way up to the top on 3rd? We are showing a narrow widening and realignment on 3rd Street to carry the curb line that's to the east across the front of the site and widen 3rd Street just a little bit. And the road improvements on Maple go all the way down to, I'm drawing a blank on the name, starts with an H. It's actually on the next page, which doesn't help you. Hendrickson, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have the
what else? Lastly, we have a storage. I'm sorry, I also forgot the police impound pen in the back left corner of the yard. So I think that is the DPW yard. DPW yard is getting smaller than it was and more compact. It is oriented to allow the existing DPW building to remain in operation again while the new building is constructed.
Thank you, Rick. So now I'll go to the floor plan. So here is a plan of the proposed building. There's the entrance facing the public parking lot. There's a workroom for staff, several staff offices, a multi-purpose room here, conference room. Then this is the vehicle garage with a vehicle lift. There's a mezzanine along the back to increase the capacity of storage on top of the mezzanine and underneath it. And various storage and equipment rooms here, and another tractor garage here. So there are 5 large bays, a smaller tractor garage. And then, as Rick mentioned, this recycling area, which is accessible by the public from the parking lot and from the yard through these gates. If we go to the next page, these are the elevations of the building. This is the view from the north from 3rd Street. See the familial similarity with the vocabulary and materials we're using in the police building. This is the view from the yard with the large truck bays. And these are the views to Allen and Maple on the side. Same materials as on the police building and the storage building. So I guess, Mayor, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Eli. Getting back to our council member questions. Councilwoman Cole, are you prepared to start us off again?
Yes, I am, Mayor.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Eli, where did the program for the building at the DPW site come from?
It came primarily from Mr. Gardella, the head of engineering, the town borough engineer, and Rich is on the call in case there are any questions about it.
Mm-hmm. This is a significant structure for a DPW yard. It's really nice. The layout is great. I'm counting roughly 5 offices, 4 bathrooms, 2 workshops. Obviously, we need the garages. I understand, I understand the site and the layout. What I'm struggling with to get to the point is this is, I'll just say fancy. This is sort of a fancy structure for the DPW. I share the concerns that both Councilwoman Neff and Councilwoman Koch expressed. I no doubt others feel the same. These are very expensive endeavors. The funds that the borough has committed already just to get to this stage have been exorbitant. I don't need to tell you that. I know you know what we spent. This is a very elaborate DPW building. There's nothing not to like about it. It's quite lovely. I like the way it's laid out and everything. I just think it's a little bit too much. I think the DPW needs to cost significantly less than our police department building. And right now they're about 67% apart. They're almost the same cost. I don't know why our DPW has gotten this elaborate. But I'm struggling with that because I don't know that this is consistent with what our taxpayers would want to put their money towards. So
Councilwoman Cole,
with that out of the way, I'll provide.
If I could just interject for a second.
Certainly.
Although in the cost, they're almost the same, you should be aware that the cost of the building part of that's the building and site. although the total of the building and site is almost the same for both sites, that the police building represents a much larger fraction of its $6 million than the public works represents of its $6 million. Most of the cost of the public works site and building is in the site, whereas most of the cost of the police building and its site is in the building. That's very important to distinguish that.
But
Because
Jim,
the public works building is not, the site there is not just redoing the entire site. It's also, which is a bigger, more area, but also replacing the salt shed, replacing the fuel island, building the recycling area, putting the biotension basin. There's a lot more work being done to the site. Even though the totals are similar, the components are completely reversed. Just wanted you to know.
Yes,
if I may jump in for one moment, just to say that it would be great if we could have a better breakdown of those costs. Because
Sure.
I had the same question, the DPW building is only 1 floor compared to the police building, which is a basement, a first floor and a second floor. And this cost seems very high to me as well. So it would be helpful if we had a better breakdown so we could understand how much of a burden that building is as part of this cost.
Sure. Yep.
thank you, Councilwoman Neff. I agree, that would be helpful. And I'll just say that perhaps there is some value engineering opportunities in the building, because I do think the investment in the site is appropriate and the important for our DPW. So there's a lot of roof here, no matter what, because we have these tall garage doors. I want to know if you guys have explored solar. There's some terrific incentives right now for solar. We want to make sure these are buildings for the future, not just the next 30 years, but ongoingly. That would help cut down on maintenance costs, annual maintenance.
Yes, our structural engineers designed the roof to carry the load of solar panels. We have not put the panels as part of the building project, but they could be easily added in the future.
Okay. And did you identify any estimates for what that might cost or what the offsets might be? Or not yet?
No, that wasn't part of our charge. So
Were you given any direction regarding solar from the committee?
we discussed with them whether they wanted to put in the provisions now, and they decided that they would want the building to be able to easily accommodate them in the future.
I believe it was covered at length in the capital review with the planning board. And there was significant commentary by the public, specifically folks that live in and around that community in terms of birds and reflection of the sun off of the panels and heat coming off of those panels as well. So those were all the considerations. So when we designed it such that in the future, if we can find ones that don't have glare and don't throw off heat and don't impact the ecology around it, the building would be able to support them. But if you're looking for ways to reduce the cost of the building, this was part of the consideration. We can always add them though.
Okay, thank you very much. What my chief concern has to do with the landscaping and the buffer between the neighborhood and the site. So I see chain link in a few places. I think I see 8-foot board on board. It's very small type. So Eli, or perhaps Rick, if it's a site issue, but could one of you just show us, maybe starting on the west side where I think it's the most crucial, just take us through the west side of the site to show us what the buffer plan is to separate the neighborhood or insulate the neighborhood from the activity on the site.
Rick? Rick, you're on Zoom, you're on mute.
Am I sharing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I pulled up the landscape plan.
That's great.
As you can see, we are heavily landscaped around the building along both the east and west sides. We have board-on-board fences across the, around the recycling area. We have open gates across the wrought iron style gates, I believe, across the driveways. Again, chain link fences around, I'm sorry, not chain link, board-on-board fences, 8-foot high board-on-boards going down around the building and across the back and around back up on Morris. The only chain link fence is around the police,
The
police,
generator.
the police storage area. And that was, so everything else is board-on-board fencing. So
I would
obviously,
really like a copy of the landscape plans for both the PD and the DPW, if that could be arranged.
no problem.
Thank you very much. Did
Here,
you?
here you'll see that also we are planning on preserving wooded areas where we could infill underneath it along the southern side on Morris. Our landscape architect went out there and thought there was enough vegetation there that made sense to try to save it. Some of the other stuff as you move towards Third is kind of straggly and less valuable. And there we are removing and replacing it with new vegetation. There's very little other than the street trees along Allen. And there we've sucked everything back in to kind of create a buffer because there's virtually no buffer along the west
Right.
side on Allen. So we've done a nice job, I think, with softening the view to the community. Because again, we do have a DPW yard in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
That's correct. Did you consider, there's also sound, so the landscaping will help with sound. Did you consider the gates? I don't know how those gates operate, but did you
They're-
consider
They're
something?
electric, they're power operated gates. They're so they slide in and out. They're slide gates.
Did you consider a solid wood or solid material to further insulate that, particularly on that west side? Noise and other things,
We didn't. Sometimes when you make these gates solid, you greatly increase the complexity of operating them. They get very heavy very fast.
Yes.
Which is why we tend not to do that. And screening on the gates tend not to hold up well over time. So also you lose visibility when you do that. And as you're pulling out, you do like to be able to see what's going on outside as you exit out. So you're not in a fortress.
You do like to, well,
Be able
it
to
can.
see
it can
through
be
the gate
movable.
as you approach the gate. At least this gives you the opportunity to see what's happening outside before you open a gate. Because you can see through these gates.
Yeah, I'm going to make the case that whatever we can do to insulate the activities and day-to-day workings of the DPW site, we should take steps to insulate that for the residents on that west side of the lot. So if there's perhaps, I do understand what you're saying about the weight of the gates and the additional mechanisms that are being required to operate that. But perhaps there's residents that can talk to us about what sort of impacts they're used to dealing with. I don't know if it's mostly noise or things, trash blowing around or traffic. I'm sure they can help direct us and let us know what the top concerns might be. But if it is noise, that might help. Mayor, that would conclude my comments and questions on DPW.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cole. Councilman McHugh, if you are ready to roll, the floor is yours. I don't know if you're speaking. If you are, you're on mute. I don't hear Councilman McHugh. We'll come back to him if
Oh, he's
Councilman.
He's
Seems
just
to be
on
logging
the-
on again, Mayor.
Why don't, do you want me to move on to Councilman Koch and we'll just come back to him? Or
Yeah,
is he?
I think he's read. Mike, can you hear us or can you talk?
He's muted.
Yeah,
Maybe-
sorry, I lost you guys again, but I'm back.
All right, Councilman McHugh, if you're ready, we can move on to Councilwoman Koch and come back to you, or if you're ready to roll, it's your turn for questions on DPW.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'll be quick, having sat in on the facilities committee. Actually, Councilwoman Cole called out a few of the things regarding solar. I think there was considerable discussion about solar. It almost occupied every meeting. That south-facing roof line is really, for lack of a better words, I guess, just juicy, like calls for solar, in my opinion. And I think, that investment in the long run will be huge. But ultimately, we've considered maybe adding it as a alternative bid or secondary bid. And maybe we can revisit that as a council as a whole and get a number on that. But ultimately, as we know, like, government is a game of compromise. And I'm at least happy with the small victory that the roof line is structurally sound enough that in the future, maybe when more people get on board with solar, that we will be able to quickly adapt that roof line to solar, and we won't have to go into any additional reinforcements or anything like that. That the foundation, though it's a roof, is essentially laid to handle those solar panels. I did get cut out a bit. The programming for the DPW, Councilwoman, I think you brought up a good case with that, as there has been some considerable changes. I think that regarding storage, roof lines and stuff like that have changed and have ultimately affected the cost. But then again, I do believe that, hey, we want to get this right for the future. And I think we're in a good spot for going forward. We've sacrificed some things. One thing that, on the recycling costs have gone up, as we know, but as some may know, that cardboard is still a relative commodity. And as is called out in those three kind of squares, one of them will be a designated cardboard bin. And although it won't be covered, because once cardboard gets wet, it essentially loses its value, there are other solutions to that, such as I think they're called dog sheds, but it's essentially a covered dumpster. So that commodity essentially will retain its value. Again, EV charging stations, the bioretention center. I don't know if we got in, I know we talked about buffering, but I think we, just to kind of enlighten the rest of the general governing body, we've given some consideration to specific tree plantings as well. Evergreens on the north side, deciduous, I'm sorry, I might have this confused, but this can be called out and feel free to correct me, but specific trees, evergreens in particular areas, and deciduous in other areas to allow for shade and cooling effects. I think, also the outside site plan work with the sidewalks has been a consideration. There has been some local residents calling that out. And then the site plan for the buffering, there are plenty of mature existing trees on the borough's property that may be called out for removal. That perhaps, I know the grading is actually pretty steep on that east side. But I would also like to echo to save as many trees as we can on that side. I think they're like locust trees, or certainly not a tree expert, but they are mature. And it does take a while to get their benefits back. Nothing else. I think there was a call out from residents on Allen about the width, and because of the garbage cans get lined up on that side for drivability, passability on garbage and recycling pickup days by our outside contractor. I'm not sure if we moved the property line in to accommodate, to tuck in those garbage cans. Can somebody speak if we are moving that in, because we do, the DPW does put out garbage cans and recycling cans on the street for pickup. Has like a little nook been called out on that?
The curb line on Allen is remaining in the same alignment as it currently is. No change on that.
Okay, we might want to, especially on the bottom entry way might lend itself to a nice, because there is already considerable buffering there, to allow for some garbage cans to place that won't affect the cars passing through on either side. There is benefit to the new entrance. They won't have the trucks essentially idling momentarily while the entrance, because we'll have the mechanized gates, which will help with the flow of traffic considerably, especially in times of emergencies for snow removal and whatnot. So as I don't actually have any questions. Perhaps maybe, could call out what has been added and then discuss as a general governing body if we feel these are wants or needs, and then just kind of move forward with that. Should we call out some of those now, or like the mezzanine? Are we going with the mechanical lift elevator still?
No, we got rid of that.
Got rid of that. So that was, I think, 15,000, something like that.
Well, when we finally got a real price from a vendor for the size that seemed most appropriate, it turned out to be quite a bit higher than that. So it was agreed that which we would not.
Great. Okay, so just regular stairwell. Storage is certainly premium, and we don't want to store stuff. Sorry, on the floors, and the stairwell can accommodate that. So again, this is not. Happy to hear that we looked into it. The cost was high, and ultimately decided not to go forward with that. That would be one of those wants that would fall into my category. And again, also keeping in mind the office space for this zoning, planning, now Nick, Rich, we'll have new offices here that won't take up space down at Borough Hall. There also, I may have missed this, but that kind of front conference area also has potential for, it will be Wi-Fi connected, accessible to the public. So it will be it will be great for the guys, to eat lunch and discuss plans, but also opens itself to the possibility of the public, or perhaps even, small Councilwoman Cole DPW meetings in there, where we can brainstorm and just look at everything. So that kind of flex space, I think, is also a benefit coming our way. And I just want to kind of call those things out, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilman McHugh. Moving along, Councilwoman Koch, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say that I do agree with Councilwoman Cole. This is an absolutely beautiful drawing, but I think it's way over the top in terms of what the facility will provide. And I'd like to point to a couple of examples. And perhaps I'm wrong, perhaps there's a need for all of this space, but I count 5 offices, a workroom, a training and break room, a workshop room. So right there are 8 rooms, and I'm not sure what the difference is between a workroom and a workshop. Could maybe you explain that, Eli?
Well, actually, I'd ask Rich Gardella to chime in here.
Sure. Good evening. Eli, can you zoom in on the floor plan?
Yeah, actually, Rick, if you can turn off yours, I'll share mine.
I can do that.
Thanks.
So there's 3 designated larger spaces that you see. On the east side, there's what we call a workshop. It's accessible off the garage area. That's primarily for building maintenance. They're gonna have a workbench in there, tools and materials to assemble things. There's also going to be space in there for the streets department to assemble street signs or to cut signs. Right now we have that space allocated throughout the existing building. One is in an overhead garage area and the other one is in one of those storage containers that's on the site closer to 3rd and Allen, which are obviously being removed. So the workshop is more like a multi-purpose workshop. That's what it is. Workbenches, etc., tools, things of that nature. And also for the Parks Department to go in there and if they have to build something or whatever we have to do, out of the elements. The other 2 spaces include, if you zoom in a little bit, in the front of the building, there's a workroom. Basically, all that is computer workstations for the staff members. Right now, we have a small area with some computers, and that allows them to check their email, do work on the computers that they do on a regular basis, and have that much needed space to continue those efforts. It's more of a general office open space, for the staff. The training break room is exactly what it is. It's a break room, it's a lunch room, it's a training room based on all the training that we have to do annually. And as Councilman McHugh had mentioned, it does kind of offer a plan B for the public if we need additional flex space. We added that exterior door that the mouse is showing there for the public to come in and access that space, whether it's for a meeting or, during a storm or Wi-Fi or whatever the case is. The other spaces are the offices and as mentioned, land use, planning, engineering, and public works are all going to be encompassed under this roof as you see it. Currently, we're kind of working out of two locations, whether it's Borough Hall, basement of Borough Hall, kind of crammed in at DPW right now, sharing desks and space. And then obviously we also work out of our vehicles because we're on site for parts of the day. So this allows not only adequate space for staff, but we envision the public coming in to meet with us as they do at Borough Hall every day. When they come in for inquiries, questions, submitting zoning permits, planning matters, engineering, all the above, and even public works. We get regular visits from residents, requesting, certain work orders, or they have questions, just general questions about leaf, brush, recycling, trash pickups, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the other offices are for the, one is for the mechanic, which he has now. And then the other two are for building maintenance and the foreman, which right now we have allocated space in the upstairs of the existing building, which is obviously less than desirable. So that kind of walks you through some of that space. And then obviously, as Eli had mentioned, the other space is, mechanical room, the boiler room, and storage is a big thing too. We're going to a smaller garage. Right now we have 6 bays, 6 large bays. We're going to 5. When we looked at this initially, not only with our professionals, but also the facilities committee, we tried to take a less is more approach. And I know it may not seem that way, but this is somewhat consolidated. And the cost is really in the site. Most of the activity is happening outside. So that's where the site plan is critical and crucial to how this all operates. And then obviously incorporating the recycling center, on the west side, and, allowing a safe environment for the residents to come in and drop off their recyclables. So that's all I have to add.
Thank you. I do have a couple of other questions. I'm not sure I understand the potential. It says here potential extent of mezzanine above. I assume it means that that's the possible border or the outside wall of the mezzanine. What is the function of the mezzanine?
Mezzanine is to allow for storage of DPW supplies and equipment throughout the 12-month cycle. So we can, provide our operation as we do now. Right now, we've got those 5 large storage containers on site down by closer to 3rd Street, which are unsightly and obviously going away. We also have some additional space in the existing building on the side, on the south side, which provides overflow currently. And then obviously going from 6 large bays to 5, we're shrinking things down a bit. And based on the design of the structure and the height of the interior roof within the garage, the mezzanine is a cost-effective way to utilize that space above there. As you can see, it's accessed by a stair. And then it also allows us to tuck things underneath, like the workbenches, some of the vehicle maintenance equipment, tools and equipment, etc. We currently have some type of makeshift mezzanines in our garages in a couple of the bays, but this would provide a more suitable arrangement and more accessible.
So what kind of material do you envision being able to store up there?
We store everything from, when Recreation orders new soccer nets in February for the upcoming season, they get drop shifted to DPW and we need to put them somewhere. It could even be, oil filters and spark plugs for vehicle maintenance. It's low impact type stuff that can be carried up a stair. Even snowplow parts we keep on hand. So when we're doing, we do have an emergency situation with a storm event, we've got, extra nuts and bolts and curb shoes and, things of that nature at our disposal. Just all that seasonal stuff that we need to store inside, we see going up there. We don't anticipate anything heavy going up there. As we had mentioned, we looked at some type of mechanical lift. Based on the size of the mezzanine, from a square footage standpoint and cost effectiveness, we didn't feel it made sense, not only my office and Eli's office, but also the facilities committee. So we felt a stair is more than adequate. And then it really provides that overflow storage we need.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I just have one or two more questions. The charging stations that you referred to in the parking area at the northern end of the property. Are you going to, I guess my question is two-part. You're not putting charging stations at the police department, you're just putting in conduits that would make it possible in the future to install charging stations, is that true?
I believe the intent at the police station is make ready spaces, also make ready spaces along the fence line on the east side in the yard for DPW equipment, possibly in the future, although that's probably significantly further out based on the progress in the construction industry, in the construction world, of coming out with electric vehicles that can handle long-term.
So in where the site plan is, and you have indicated there are charging stations, that's not actually going to happen, that's potential?
There are two charging stations proposed on the east side of the parking lot, right in front of the two offices that bump out just a little bit. Can you zoom in? Yeah, right there, Elon. Correct. So
Can you
there are
show
two
me that?
chargers. Construct where the two EV chargers. It's a two-station charger.
Okay. And is there, like, is it expensive to install, and is it free to the residents to use and charge their cars anytime they want? I mean, how does that work?
So the how it works is not yet definitively defined. You can get systems where you have swipe cards and or take credit cards for anybody who parks there to charge. You can make it open public, which some municipalities do. As far as a cost, there's a cost associated with conduit. There's the cost of the charging. It's the chargers itself. That is a double charger.
Would this be under contract to somebody, so the maintenance would be included, or is it just for the borough itself? They would have to arrange for installation and maintenance?
Right now, it's specified as a stanchion with two charging ports without the communications features for billing and things like that. We were not given direction to look at that.
Okay. One last question associated with that.
Councilwoman Koch, I just wanted to give you some of, I could do it later. I can give you some of the thinking about the charging station if you want, or I can wait till later.
You can say it, but I just want
Chris.
to ask a question.
Sure.
We live
Chris,
in
you're
a
up
town.
next. So
Pardon me?
I was just going to say, Chris, you're up next. So Councilwoman Koch, why don't you finish your thoughts, and then Chris can jump in and go right into it.
Okay. So we live in a town that's less than 2 square miles. If these chargers are for the convenience of the residents, wouldn't they be driving around in a charged vehicle? And I mean, even if something happened to the vehicle, you could walk home if you had to, but it seems like a lovely amenity, a lovely expensive amenity for our residents, who, I don't know how many electrical vehicles we actually have in town, that our residents would take advantage of that amenity.
If I may, at least in part, they came about. As you know, the state passed a statute, and I think it was in July, if I'm not mistaken, mandating EV stations, 15% EV charging stations in parking lots on commercial and residential developments. This was in response to that question, at least in part. And the discussion was that we could provide 2 parking spaces in this parking lot. The discussion was that you really didn't want charging in the police lot for the public. And obviously it was confined, didn't want people coming into the public works yard. So that's at least in part, and I'm sure Councilman Rodriguez can elaborate further, but that was at least in part why those are there.
Yeah, if I may, kind of, Chris, I know you have the floor, but I'd be super quick. Betsy, we were looking at, there's basically a rolling grant for something called pay to plug in. All right, so this isn't like free electricity for people, you know, everyone going to the baseball field, you know, people from Shrewsbury coming in to plug in. It's a pay to plug in, and kind of aligned, like Rick was saying, from the state coming down, but there is tons of grants, but we can't apply. We won't get approved for the grant yet because it needs to be completed within a year. So when we make this ready, looking forward in a year, the green team, we will make this application and basically get it paid for. And it will be a pay to plug in campaign. So electric
If you
vehicle.
get the grant, you have to get the grant first.
Right, and they're super, you know, it's, they're very liberal with their grant process. It's nothing is for sure, of course, but I have the confidence that we would be able to secure that grant funding. That's it. Thank you, sir, Chris.
And one last question, and it's a question that I rose with regards to the police department. It's a beautiful building. It's beautiful from the outside. And I would like to see us scale back on some of the materials that are used. I think that we can come up with some equally adaptable or equally acceptable materials to hardy board or to the stone foundation. That really seems quite extreme to me. And that is it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Koch. Councilman Rodriguez, right into it.
Thanks. I won't talk much more about, Councilman McHugh touched a lot on the charging stations. We discussed for many meetings, and it seemed like almost every meeting, it felt like the solar panels, we did put a lot, we put a lot of thought into it. So, you know, we could always remove them. We thought it would be forward thinking. We thought it would be something that the community would want to see. We didn't think it would be a big moneymaker for us. Also didn't think it'd be a big money loser either. We weren't thinking about giving out free energy at the expense of the other taxpayers either, because we pay for our power. So to that end, I'll leave it at that. We could take them out, we can put them in. We do foresee vehicles moving in that direction, especially if our $4 gasoline goes to $8 or something to that extent. So, you know, this is just something we should consider for the future. But none of this is etched in stone. It comes up often, and we tried to find ways to design these buildings in the most cost-effective way. We didn't want to put expensive materials in, to the extent that we can find reasonable alternatives without compromising the quality. We don't want to build a building that's going to fall down in 20 years when you know, we could pay for the quality construction and materials needed for something that'll last 50 years. So the design standard and the materials that we are putting into these buildings are not, I don't believe they're expensive to the, relative to other materials that are out there. We did consider, as I mentioned in a comment earlier, the consideration from community input multiple times, including community input from our planning board under the capital review. So can we save money? That's, ultimately we're trying to be as efficient as economical as possible because as Eli said, the inflation of material costs, supply chain issues, and overall cost of construction has increased over the last 20 months, and it's just something that's on everybody's mind on the facilities committee and on the finance committee. And will continue to be so when we evaluate the bids. So I don't have any comments on the, I think we've covered all of the items, and of course I participated in the design of these of both the police department and the Department of Public Works. So I don't necessarily have any questions. I just wanted to call out some of the items that I just mentioned. So I will yield the balance of any time I had left back to the floor.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. Moving along, Councilwoman Neff. Councilwoman Neff, if you're speaking, you may be on mute.
Thank you.
Right.
I'll be relatively brief. I mean, I do think the building is gorgeous, at least looking at the design. I do wonder, to what degree the beautiful design is also making it expensive. I mean, there are a lot of windows that I see along the front of the building. I think on the top here is all windows as well, small windows between the two roof lines. It clearly makes it quite pretty. I'm assuming it's brick at the bottom. So it really is a very attractive building, but I do wonder if we need something that looks this fancy. And I also wonder if we can shrink the size or should consider shrinking some of the size. So the thing that will, I will have to trust that the facilities committee has considered some of these cuts. I do wonder whether it might be worth revisiting some of it, or at least investigating some possibilities, because I am concerned about the combined cost of these two buildings. That's making me fairly concerned. I did have a question on the roof color. Do we know what the roof color is going to be?
No, for the same reason I mentioned before about the siding, that in public bidding, you don't know whose products will be proposed by the successful contractor. So it would be premature to pick a color until we know whose products. It'll be a standard roofing color of whichever roofing manufacturer is submitted and approved.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is, I think Councilman Rodriguez mentioned that there were some residents concerned about the possibility of solar panels in the future. And I think I heard comments about glare and heat and potential impact on birds. I would just suggest that, I know we're not going to necessarily put the solar roofs now, but I think we need to investigate those comments a little in further detail. I do have solar in my home, and I have black solar panels that blend in with some dark gray roof color that I have. So if we intend to place solar in the future or consider it, I would suggest considering a darker roof color it may be dark gray or so, such that in the future, maybe an option would be to place black solar panels on the roof. Not that I think maybe the residents are thinking about the old-fashioned, ugly blue ones that are out there, but now there are much sleeker looking panels that I don't know that they will be causing any heat or glare or interference with birds. So I just wanted to mention that. We might want to consider that when we consider the color of the roof. I also wanted to say I'm glad to see the 2 EV chargers in the front. I'm aware of the grant that Councilman McHugh is talking about for the EV charger, and I think we should pursue that. And I think there's a good chance we might get that. So I think we need to be looking, to the future, and I'm glad to see that there. And obviously, we should charge for the use of it. But if it's a net, no cost to us, assuming we do pursue a grant, we'll be very supportive of that. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Councilwoman Neff. Councilwoman Christner Keefe.
Everyone stole all of my questions. So, which is usually not the case. Usually it's the opposite. Somehow I always end up going first, Mayor. Thank you. No, I don't have any questions at the moment about the DPW. It's largely been covered by the other comments and questions that have been raised here tonight. Thank you so much.
Great, Councilwoman. At this point, I'd like to move towards public comment for the DPW facility. Please identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Teresa, is there anyone with their hand up?
Yes, sir. I'm going to start with Claudia Brady. Go ahead, Claudia.
Hi, I'm Claudia Brady, Fairhaven Road, and this is a little aside, but I don't want it to be lost in the cost financial conversation that has become very important with these buildings. We've had a great inflationary cost in the cost of building, but we've also had an increase in the value of land in Fairhaven. And when we first heard about the DPW project, I believe there was consideration of selling some of the land that I think it was the town owns behind this site. And there was some thought that it could be anywhere from 2 to potentially 4 building sites. So I just want this as part of the cost conversation going forward to be looked at and examined, and perhaps we could offset some of the inflation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Claudia.
Mayor, next I have Andy Ashwold's hand up, and I will say for the benefit of the public and the rest of the governing body that Andy's a member of the Facilities Committee.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
Hello. How's everybody doing? Teresa, thank you so much. Andy Ashwall, 42 Woodland Drive South. Yes, I am a member of the Facilities Committee. Thank you, Council, for listening to the presentation this evening, as well as members of the community. I'd like to say that I'm very excited for what we're looking to and reviewing and looking to provide not only to the Fairhaven community, but to the police department and the members of the DPW that really help our town and make our town great. And there's been also some comments just about the buildings and the materials of the buildings. And I think we're looking forward to making sure that the buildings that we're looking to provide to the town of Fairhaven will last for just as long as the buildings that we're currently using and selecting those right materials. And appreciate everybody's acknowledgement of the nod to sustainability with some of the EV charging that we have and have proposed going on. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Mayor, next up is Stephanie Adams. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Adams, 230 Oxford. 2 quick questions. I wanted to go back to the solar conversation and just sort of build a little bit on what Lalini was saying. I recall some early conversations about this project and solar. I'm just wondering did we ever get bids? Like, do we know how many kilowatts we would need for this particular facility? And did we get any quotes?
Eli, Chris?
I'd like to, when you say how many watts, do you mean how many watts you'd need to run this facility?
Correct. Like how much solar you would need, how many panels you would need?
Oh, well, I can just tell you from experience that it's unlikely that even if you cover the entire roof of this building, that you'd be able to power the entire building when it's fully in use. Because you know, you only get maximum power generation in the middle of the day and when it's sunny. And in the winter, you've got shorter days. So, and also you don't actually, and you probably know this, but just in case there are people who don't, that you don't actually use the electricity that you generate to serve your building. It's simply put back into the grid and runs your electric meter for the building backwards while you're generating and forwards when you're not. So the area that, which I think Councilman McHugh mentioned, the south-facing plane here of the roof is the ideal place for panels. But that's not because it's facing south, but it's not going to generate enough. Maybe on a momentary basis in the middle of the summer, it will be generating more than you need. But on an annual basis, it's not going to generate enough that, you know, it's not going to offset all the power you need to run the building, but it will help and it will reduce your energy costs.
But so did we actually get a quote on how much it would cost to install the panels?
No, we did not. No.
We're not at the bid stage process yet. So that might have been out of order. We haven't bid out for, you know, steel, any masonry. You know, ultimately, we didn't want to bid out because there are costs of doing the bidding. So that's all to come. And, you know, like Councilman McHugh said, we can always do an alternate bid that includes solar panels in it. So we have considered your concept so that when the council ultimately has to decide, what are we going to go to, you know, go forward with, they'll be armed with all of the information with and without that type of resource on the building.
But so at the moment it sounds like at the moment the plan is not to install them initially. And so I guess what I was confused is because it might be cost prohibitive, but you're not sure how cost prohibitive because you don't actually, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost and whether or not it's viable at this stage, or if it's something you would do in a year or 2 years, or you're not at that, you're not able to make that determination yet.
We're 100% sure we designed the infrastructure
Yes.
to handle solar.
Yes.
And so if there is a benefit to doing it immediately from a cost or grant or rebate perspective, you know, that'd be very interesting to the taxpayers, and that's who we represent. We haven't gotten to the bid stage. We hopefully will get to that very, very soon. And the whole point, if the council comes back and says we don't want solar, then we would have wasted a whole bunch of time bidding things out. So the next stage is to solidify the designs. The council will come back and say, we want solar, or we don't want solar, or we want it as an alternate. And then we will bid for that. So that is yet to come is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Can I jump in real quick in the interest of sharing information? Eli, did you not, or did you run the potential square footage of that roof line and the potential number of panels?
I did. I don't have that number with me, but I can certainly get you the area that's involved. The panels typically are running 3 feet by 5 feet, 15 square feet. And I can certainly tell you how many panels we can put up there.
And you would
also, I'm sorry, I should also point out that for the purpose, for the information of the public, that there are ways in which panels can be put up there for free. There are companies out there that basically will essentially rent your roof, and they'll put up the panels for free and share the savings in the cost of the power they generate over like 7 years, after which you own the panels. And that's a way to make the borough's initial capital cost zero. So it isn't just a matter of putting the panels or not, it's how you get them put there, who owns them, and what that means in terms of your electricity rate.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's happened in other government buildings as close as Asbury Park, I believe. I'll circle back with you specifically, Eli, and get that back to the public. Because based on the number of panels, you'd be able to calculate potential kilowatt generation, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I got some homework. Thank you, Eli.
Yeah, because ultimately at some point you might not be able to, power the whole building, but you can calculate what your energy savings are going to be over time. If you're generating excess energy at certain points that you could sell back, there's all kinds of considerations. And I understand what you're saying, Chris, about not bidding it out at this point, but it might be helpful just to get some sort of estimate at this stage so that, you have an idea of what you're looking at and whether you even, and I feel like there might be a difference between bidding it out and just getting an estimate and just finding out, ballpark what you're looking at.
Agreed. And I'm interested also in, where the council stands on that in terms of this project, and the police department doesn't really offer a great opportunity, just simply the way that the roof is oriented.
Right.
So that one's a little bit less appealing from that front.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Josh, I have one more quick question. Am I allowed to ask a second question?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm just wondering, was any consideration, and it's really not the best time to be asking this question while they're putting in a new playground at the community center, was any consideration ever given to moving the DPW to the area behind PD and making that all sort of a complex, and then at some point building playgrounds and a new community center at the existing DPW? So you would sort of, you go from having residents on 3 sides to only 1 side. There just seemed to be a lot of reasons why it might make sense. Was any consideration ever given to that?
I can answer that. The answer is yes. We had an initial plan that it was just a sketch, a schematic. It was not the designs that you're seeing to this level that we presented to the community. I want to say it was either late 2017 or early 2018 where we did create that interconnected complex, and we got, just generally got negative feedback to that end. The history of it all, effectively, we were going to consider putting the Borough Hall with the police station in that area as well. Then we just, as a previous council member of the 2017, 2018, 2019 council, we looked at the Sunoco site, which was also presented as a concept to the community, which was rejected. And then we looked at 623 River Road, which is across the street, and that was also presented as a concept. And Councilwoman Cole mentioned that there was a lot of cost already baked into these plans, not for what they look like today, but for other concepts that ultimately we moved away from based on public feedback. So yes, we did consider it. At the time, it was not well received, so we tried an alternate solution at the time, and now we've arrived at this set of plans.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris. And thanks for all the work that you've done on these projects.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Teresa, is there anyone else with their hand
Anyone
up?
else from the public wants to be recognized? Please raise your hand. I got a W. Rodriguez here. Go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Wilson here on Allen Street. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wilson,
Yes.
can you just
Awesome.
recognize that we're not related, please? Just
We're
kidding.
not
Yeah.
related. Yes. No, I thank you. Thank you to the board, the facilities committee, et cetera. This has been ongoing for some of you that may or may not. I think Chris just mentioned it, perhaps over 4 years, and the DPW has been, the PD planning has been going on for over 2 years. I believe this is probably the third significant redesign, architecturally speaking, of the DPW, with the first designs being a little bit more elaborate. Nowhere near a castle, but nonetheless, at least this design here is consistent with the neighborhood feel, considering that you have an industrial building within a neighborhood. And the residents are appreciative that it's not a industrial looking building and or jail with just 4 walls and no windows. So we appreciate that effort. But just some questions regarding the driveway on the Allen Street side. I believe there was discussion of, I think, widening them. I don't know if that was incorporated in the design.
I believe they were widened slightly to make the turns easier.
I also agree with the councilman, I don't remember her last name, I think it's Cole, regarding at least the gates to the driveway to be not necessarily solid, but at least some sort of privacy effort. Nobody wants to be seen in there or out there. Right now, there is some sort of privacy screens on the metallic gates, and we appreciate that. So if that can be considered, that would be nice. Regarding the salt shed on the corner there, I'm not sure. I think this was mentioned in the past. Particularly, nobody wants to see the salt shed from the driveway. I don't know if that can be angled 45 degrees, if you will, where it's kind of facing the center of the yard.
It was actually angled at some point, and the committee had it rotated to the position it's in for improved function. So I think the orientation of the salt shed is basically for function at this point.
All right.
It is not that, by the way, the door is on the north side, so it's not exposed to the public. It's just the side of a building.
Oh, I
and that
see.
shed gets finished in similar plank to similar siding to the main building, so it doesn't look like a generic shed. It will look like a slightly nicer looking building in that regard.
And just to confirm, the driveway, the southern driveway, was that able to be shifted, I guess, northbound a couple of feet or so?
It moved a couple feet, correct. It's
Awesome.
essentially the same location, but it did move north a little bit.
Do we know exactly by chance, or?
I do not. I'm sorry. This has been a long time in iterations, I'm afraid.
Got it. And regarding the trash, we would greatly appreciate that if that's possible. There's times where there's upwards of 10 trash cans on the side there. Sometimes there's 2. There's also been discussions of potentially getting a separate dumpster, if you will, within the yard. But I understand that requires a separate contract, et cetera. But nonetheless, that type of provision would be nice. And I think the last comment would be, I think I hit them all. On the southern side of the yard, did that encroach a little bit into the wooded area?
It does encroach a little bit into the wooded area, which
Do we know how much by chance?
About 7 to 10 feet, something like that. Right there.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson.
Mayor, I have Bob Gasparini with his hand up. I also will say that Bob, for the benefit of the public and council, Bob Gasparini is a member of the Facilities Committee.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Good. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Appreciate the time and effort. As a member of the committee, it's been many hours and many discussions to try to make sure that we, produce a product that fits as best as possible into the community. Keeping in mind the residents that do surround the areas. Eli, can you, and maybe I've been listening to the comments about the scale and the size and the look of the building. And honestly, when it was first sort of brought up, it does seem like a very large sort of grand structure. Can you bring up the site plan or the rendering from the planning board? Just to give an idea of what it sort of looks like on the site. I think it might help a little bit in understanding how it sort of fits into that spot.
Let me see if I can find it. Bear with me a second. Right, so the idea in the development of and this was based on many discussions with the Facilities Committee and the Planning Board, was to have a low scale on the west, north, and east sides. And the biggest block of space in this building is the garage, which is twice as tall as everything else. So the idea was that facing the public sides, it would be low, and that would help to shield a much taller garage piece, which faces into the yard. This is the area where the bioswale is. This is the landscaping along the north side where the public parking lot is, and then landscaping along the Allen Street side here. These are the driveways for the trucks to go in. So again, the idea was to keep it very low, except facing into the yard, where it has to be taller to accommodate the large pieces of equipment.
And Eli, the overall height of the building is sort of, it's relative to the other structures in town as much as possible. I think it's basically the same height, correct?
Correct. In one of the earlier iterations to the planning board, it was taller, and we cut it significantly down in order to assure that it would be no higher than the prevailing heights around.
Right. I think originally there were offices upstairs. Maybe there was like a true second floor.
Well, there's a partial second floor. That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then my other topic I wanted to sort of touch on was, there's been a lot of discussion about the materials, and I know other council members have sort of mentioned it. That was also many lengthy conversations about the types of materials we wanted to use, the cost of those materials, what the savings would be to go to something else, something a little different. And I think overall, we were trying to keep in mind the cost benefit analysis of, if we're going to save 20% on the cost of the siding, what are we giving up in the long-term durability of those products? I mean, this, especially the DPW building, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of heavy equipment traffic. there's an exposure to a lot of different elements. And I think the idea to use the materials that will withstand time and the elements the best, even if it's slightly higher cost, is going to yield a much better benefit for the community over time, versus trying to save $50,000, $100,000 over the both buildings to sort of, move to something that's a little bit less. I'd like people to keep that in mind, that we're trying to, while it may seem like we're spending a little bit more, we're making a significant investment into the durability of the building and the overall beauty of the buildings. Try to make them not look like an industrial building stuck in the center of a residential neighborhood. Other than that, I don't really have any other comments. I mean, it's been a pleasure serving, and I'm very satisfied with the product that we've come up with to this point. So that's all I have.
Eli, can you go back to that slide for a second?
Thank you, Bob.
Sorry, Mayor.
It's okay.
I think we should call Bonnie Torsivia, Wendy Murphy right away, get them over there to measure that tree for the big tree hunt. That is a beauty.
Teresa, is there anyone else?
Yes, sir. Maritza Owens has her hand up, or I'm gonna allow. Go ahead.
Hi, it's not Maritza Owens. Sorry, I realized I'm just using my work account. It's Liz McNeil. Hi.
Oh, hi, Liz. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I forgot I was my work account. I was like, Maritza Owens. I just wanted to pop in because I live on 3rd Street. As I just said, I live, on 3rd between Church and Maple. And I just want to say thank you. This is a gorgeous building. And it was it's been, a little bit anxiety producing for everyone in the neighborhood, what was going to replace it. And to see that it's really fits in with the scale of the neighborhood is a huge relief. To see that there's all this extra parking is a huge relief, because that it's really actually becoming a real issue with the increased use of the 3rd Street playground. And I think it's just beautiful. And I just want to say thank you. And then I do have one question. And if you cover this, I apologize. But is there, did you guys discuss putting in a power wall? I know you're talking about putting in solar panels, but since you've got the chargers there, car chargers there anyway, what about a power wall?
That was not discussed.
That was not, we had not discussed that particularly. In an institutional setting, I don't know if there's any precedent for that. It didn't come up. We can look into that for sure. All of these ideas are great ideas. When you mention that, can you help us? And I don't have one. Can you give us some idea of what the benefit would be to the community or to the DPW? Because that could help guide the conversation.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert at it, although we do have an expert who lives on McCarter. So I'm going to connect him to you, because he actually installed one in his house. But my husband looked at installing one in our house, and it basically serves as a generator, and it creates its own electricity, and then it's connected. It's very much like solar panels. It's connected to the power system in town, so you can sell back your power if you collect more power. So I don't know, it's just something, and I know that it connects, this is my limited knowledge of it, but it somehow also could be impactful on the car chargers. In other words, it would be connected to that, and the power that it's creating would actually be able to feed in and power those car chargers. That's my limited understanding of it, but that's why I thought with all the talk of solar panels, I would ask about it.
If I may comment briefly on that, for a house like mine, I think a house like a 4,000 square feet or so, you will probably need 3 power walls minimal to charge, to maintain the house charged in a blackout. I actually think that is the main benefit. And yeah, allows the solar panels to continue functioning. So if you have solar panels on the roof, but you have a blackout, they don't work. If you have a power wall or several power walls, you can choose what you want to connect to for the power wall. So you don't have to have the whole building working, but you might have portions of the building working with the lights on and anything else you think needs to be running. And then you can also have the solar panel continuing to recharge that power wall. So de facto, the building continues to have power, although limited, but it's not out of power in a blackout. That is actually the main benefit of a power wall. I don't know if that's something that is important for the DPW, but it might be important in an emergency situation.
Just for everybody's information, both of the buildings, the police building and the public works. Excuse me. Thank you. Will have their own diesel-powered emergency generators. So they're already covered completely for emergency power. And in the case of the police building, it's required as a condition of the type of building. And then just for the purpose of maintaining service in emergencies and blizzards and so on, the public works building needs its own reliable backup generator.
Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. Teresa, is there anyone else with their hand
Anybody?
up?
I did not see another hand there. Unless there's someone still wants to speak, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I believe that's the conclusion of the questions from the public, sir.
Okay. I wanted to thank everyone here. Just as a little bit of a rundown on next steps. We're going to have a review of the financing and tax impact with our CFO, the financial advisor, the bond counsel, and the finance committee. Those figures will be shared with the full governing body prior to our special 5 p.m. meeting on May 25th. That being said, I wanted to thank Eli and Rick for the considerable amount of time that everyone spent here tonight in answering everyone's questions and preparing these plans. Additionally, I would like to thank the facilities team for all of the time that they volunteered in putting these together. Obviously, I'd like to thank the entire governing body, the council. In addition to that, Brian Mead, Rich Gardella, the chief, thank you for being here, Allison and Teresa, and of course, all of our resident contributors tonight. We appreciate you getting on here and giving us your thoughts. With that being said, I just want to say thank you to everyone and have a great night. And we look forward to discussing this in more detail in the future days and weeks.
Do we need a motion to close
Yes,
the
we're going to
meeting?
do a motion to adjourn. To anyone?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.